The flashbulbs were relentless. Alex Crane adjusted the cuff of his charcoal suit, his diamond watch catching the overhead lights. He hated being here. Fashion had become tired. Predictable. Like his marriage. His gaze flicked sideways. Nina, draped in a blood-red silk dress, leaned closer, her perfume cutting through the stale air. "Look at that disaster," Alex whispered, nodding at the model gliding down the runway in layers of what he called funeral rags. "This is what they call couture now." Nina giggled softly. She knew when to let him feel superior. The cameras pivoted toward them, the billionaire and the mysterious young woman at his side. Alex's expression shifted to a performative smirk. Everything was control, perception, brand, except tonight, from behind the runway curtains, Elaine Crane listened to his voice echoing faintly across the stage. The sound scraped through her like glass. For 7 years, she'd sat next to him at these events. Silenced. Perfect. Owned. Not tonight. She tightened the vintage clasp of the gown at her throat. Her gown. Her design. A creation Alex had called obsolete when he forced her out of her own label. She looked down at her trembling hands, then steadied them. Outside, Alex sipped his champagne. "Old styles, old minds," he said loud enough for the adjacent rows to hear, eyes glinting. "That's why I bought her company. To save it from itself." Nina's smile faltered, just for a second. But she recovered. "Maybe you should walk the runway next, Alex," she teased lightly. "Show them what power looks like." He laughed. Too loud. Too sharp. Behind the curtains, Elaine heard that toot at a stagehand. Confused, looked at her. "Ma'am? Are you?" "I'm next," Elaine whispered. Her voice cracked, but her posture didn't. The house lights dimmed. "I in the front row." Alex's voice dropped. "Let's leave after the finale. I've seen enough." He had no idea. Backstage, a zipper fastened. Beads glimmered like tears. Elaine stepped forward as the music shifted. Heavy. Timeless. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not tonight. Not in this show. Not anymore. But every runway had two sides. The one he controlled, and the one he could never see coming. And tonight, it belonged to her. The velvet curtain stirred. Alex took another sip, his smirk returning. Then the music stopped. Silence. And every head turned toward the woman stepping onto the runway. His wife, his forgotten queen. The spotlight hit. The glass slipped from Alex's hand and shattered, just like his certainty. She once believed marriage was a partnership. But in Alex Crane's world, it was paperwork. Elaine remembered the contract more vividly than the wedding vows. Pages of legal clauses disguised as promises. Mutual benefit, he'd said, sliding the agreement across the polished mahogany table. Not a proposal, a transaction. She'd signed at first. She told herself it was protection. For her designs. For her brand. For herself. But over time, the lines blurred. The protection became a cage. And the signature her own chain. Back then, Elaine Crane had been more than a wife. She'd been the name sewn onto runways, her designs gracing royalty and red carpets. She remembered the feel of silk under her fingertips, the hum of late nights at the atelier. Her world had been fabric and freedom, until Alex invested. She replayed the memory often. "Your company's failing, Elaine," he'd said in that tone she came to fear. "Let me help you." By help, he meant takeover, by saving. He meant erasing. Her name remained above the door. But inside, her decisions no longer mattered. A single boardroom meeting had severed her from the empire she built. One vote. His. The next day, her studio access was revoked by order of her husband. Elaine stood outside her atelier that morning, rain dripping from her coat, reading the security memo that bore Alex's signature. She didn't cry. She simply walked away. Now, backstage at tonight's show, those same papers felt heavier than the couture on her shoulders. Every stitch of the gown she wore whispered of those lost years. Her inner voice trembled, but it did not break. "You are not owned," in their penthouse apartment. Alex had always spoken of image. Success wasn't about substance, it was about control. He dressed her in labels he approved, monitored her interviews, silenced her designs. "You're my wife. Act like it." Elaine remembered standing in front of the mirror, makeup applied by professionals, wearing dresses she didn't design, rehearsing words she didn't write. And when the cameras left, so did his interest. Their marriage, she realized, was never love. It was strategy. Control masked as affection, business disguised as family. Elaine's narration deepened, quiet yet bitter. I let him buy me. And then wondered why I felt sold. In public, Alex praised her. In private, he dismissed her. Every compliment was a command. Every kiss, a brand. And when she began to resist, he simply replaced her. Nina, younger, obedient, unthreatening. Elaine watched it happen without protest. She told herself that silence was strength, but silence had cost her everything. Until tonight, behind the velvet curtain, Elaine inhaled slowly, the weight of her own creation settling around her. Alex might have taken her company, but he could never take her craftsmanship. Her soul wasn't for sale. She ran her fingers over the embroidery one last time. Tonight, her gown would walk the runway, and so would her truth. Elaine stepped toward the light. Her narration, cold but clear. This isn't a show. It's a reckoning. The music rose outside, and the crowd's murmurs died. Elaine's past slipped from her shoulders like an unwanted veil. Her next step would change everything. Nina adjusted the thin strap of her red silk dress, letting it fall just slightly off her shoulder, an imperfection that drew more attention than perfection ever could. She knew the cameras watched. She liked it. Beside her, Alex Crane sat silent now, eyes locked on the runway where Elaine had just disappeared behind the curtains. His glass of champagne trembled slightly in his hand. Nina leaned closer, her voice smooth as the fabric she wore. Don't let her rattle you, Alex. She's just desperate. He didn't respond, and Nina's gaze flicked toward the exit, calculating. Public embarrassment wasn't part of the plan, but adaptation was her strength. Your wife showing up here? She laughed softly. It's pathetic. Still nothing. Inside, she hated Elaine, not for being the wife, but for what Elaine represented, a threat. A legacy. Nina had spent 2 years removing Elaine from every boardroom, every press conference, every atelier. She'd whispered suggestions, framed as innocent advice. Maybe Elaine needs rest. She's stuck in old ideas, Alex. You're the future. Let me handle the interviews. She's not media-friendly. Each word a thread, slowly unraveling Elaine's place, until she was gone. But now, Elaine walked runways again, and Nina's carefully woven power began to fray. Alex finally spoke, his voice brittle. She wasn't supposed to be here. Nina nodded, voice softer. I know. For a moment, the image slipped. Alex, once commanding, looked fragile. Beaten not by scandal, but by the return of a woman he thought he'd erased. Nina placed a manicured hand over his. You handled it before. You'll handle it again. But even she could hear the uncertainty. Her narration sharpened. I thought I'd replaced her. I thought I'd won. She watched him look past her, toward where Elaine had stood, and Nina realized something chilling. Elaine hadn't come to take back Alex. She'd come for something far more dangerous. Her name. Nina squeezed his hand tighter. Focus on the strategy, not the drama. Alex's laugh cracked dryly. This is a goddamn disaster. No, Nina whispered, leaning in like a confidant, but thinking like a rival. It's a setback, and setbacks can be eliminated. Alex glanced at her then, uncertain. For the first time, Nina saw doubt in his eyes. Doubt in her. She smiled anyway, because smiles were armor. From the runway, a round of applause erupted backstage, the kind reserved for legends. Nina's stomach turned. Elaine Crane was not gone. She was reborn, and Nina's war was only beginning. Atelier smelled the same. Dust, fabric, silence. Elaine stood in the doorway, her silhouette caught in the fractured sunlight filtering through boarded windows. Time had not touched this place. Not the walls, not the scattered sketches yellowing on the tables, nor the mannequin that still wore her last unfinished design. Only she had changed, and tonight, she would finish it, madam. A voice behind her, hesitant. Sophie, her last seamstress. The one who hadn't taken Alex's buyout. The one who stayed when the lights were turned off. Elaine turned slowly. I need your help. Sophie didn't ask why. She simply stepped inside. They worked. In silence. There were no assistants now. No PR agents hovering. Just thread, needles, raw fabric, and 2 women who remembered what it meant to create. Elaine's narration cracked. Trembling. I used to design for the world. Tonight, I designed to survive. Each stitch was both a memory and a rebellion. Alex had forbidden this gown. He called it too sentimental, outdated. It didn't fit his image of her brand. So she buried it, but not destroyed. Not even he had that power. She watched Sophie's aged hands guide the needle through delicate embroidery. "You're shaking, madam." Elaine looked down. Her hands trembled without permission. "I'm not afraid." She lied. Sophie paused, then resumed sewing. Neither spoke of the truth. Elaine wasn't sewing a gown. She was sewing herself back together, for hours. They worked in silence broken only by the snip of scissors and the crackle of the old iron. In the dead of night, the atelier became a tomb for the woman Elaine used to be, and the birthplace of who she was becoming. Sophie's voice broke the silence once. "Why now?" Elaine didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet, because even she wasn't sure if this was revenge or resurrection. By dawn, the gown was nearly complete. Layers of midnight blue silk shimmered in the pale morning light, hand-stitched crystals glinting like silent tears. The bodice curved elegantly, strong yet delicate, just like the woman who would wear it, just like the woman who created it. Elaine touched the fabric softly. This was not a design. It was defiance. Alex's voice echoed in her memory, venom dressed as reason. "You don't understand branding, Elaine. People don't want heart. They want power." She had believed him, but tonight, she would remind him. Power comes from creation, not control. She stepped away from the mannequin. "It's ready." Sophie watched her closely. "You are too, madam." Elaine wasn't sure, but she nodded her. Inner narration whispered, hollow and fragile. "If this fails, I vanish." Behind her, Sophie silently packed the last of the tools. No questions, no doubts. Elaine folded the gown carefully into the old garment bag, the same one Alex had once forced her to leave behind. Not this time. She carried it herself. As she stepped outside, the morning light burned too bright, too honest, but she didn't look away. The bass line of the runway music thumped like a heartbeat, hollow, mechanical, rehearsed. Alex sat motionless. Another model drifted past. He didn't bother looking. "Derivative," he muttered, swirling the last of his champagne. Nina smirked beside him, leaning in just enough for cameras to capture their false intimacy. "They're chasing trends again," he added. "Repackaging. Nostalgia. Weak." Nina laughed softly, but even she sensed something fragile in his tone. Across the aisle, fashion editors scribbled notes. Journalists whispered. But Alex felt untouchable. His empire, his show, his narrative. Until the music faltered. First, Alex thought it was a technical glitch, a momentary silence where the bass should have pulsed. But the silence didn't end. Whispers rippled through the front rows. Alex turned, brows furrowing. From backstage, a figure appeared. A woman. Alone. Cameras didn't flash. Not yet. No one understood what they were seeing. And then the spotlight shifted. Onto her. Onto Elaine. His wife. Alex's breath caught. He hadn't seen her in months. And now, she walked toward him in no jewelry. No spectacle. Just the gown. Her gown. Midnight. Silk caught the light, flowing like shadows. Crystals stitched by hand reflected the stage lights in fractured tears. The gown shimmered not like wealth, but like memory. Nina gripped Alex's wrist, nails biting skin. "Who authorized this?" Her voice cracked. Alex said nothing, because he knew that no one had authorized this. Elaine had. She moved down the runway, each step deliberate, her posture unyielding, not triumphant, not vengeful, free. And in that moment, Alex saw it. The woman he had tried to erase, not from hatred, but from fear. Nina whispered again, urgently now. Stop her. But he couldn't. Elaine wasn't walking for him anymore. She wasn't walking for anyone. Alex's narration fractured inside his skull. How? How is she here? Who let her? No, not let. She'd taken it. Around him, the audience finally reacted. Phones lifted. Cameras clicked. The runway that had been his arena now belonged to her. Elaine's narration, cold and steady. You mocked my designs. You mocked me. This gown is both the end of the runway. She paused. Her gaze swept the silent crowd. And then, her eyes found Alex. Not as a plea, not as a curse, but as a quiet declaration. I am not yours. I end the silence. Alex heard something he couldn't name. The sound of losing control. Elaine turned and walked away. The applause came slowly, then louder, Then unstoppable Nina's voice cracked into panic. Do something. Alex stood, but the cameras weren't looking at him anymore. Alex Crane did not move, could not move. That Elaine's silhouette faded into the backstage shadows, yet the image burned behind his eyes. His world, so carefully built, felt paper-thin. Beside him, Nina's voice sliced the air. Stop her. Alex, stop her. Her fingers dug into his wrist, but he barely felt it. His mind, so sharp in boardrooms, so ruthless in negotiations, stuttered. That gown, that he remembered it now. The unfinished piece she used to work on late into the nights he resented, the one he banned, the one he buried. Yet there it was, public, alive, and she, Elaine, had worn it without his consent. Nina's voice cracked again. You need to fix this. Alex's gaze flicked to her, disoriented. Fix what? Her. This. His narration splintered. This isn't real. This can't be real, because Elaine wasn't supposed to fight. She wasn't supposed to win. She was supposed to vanish. Nina's hand tightened. She humiliated you. Alex's throat tightened, not because of the public, but because he didn't know how she did it. Control had always been his currency, and she'd stolen it.in silence.in silk. Around them, reporters whispered, Alex. Caught stray words. Come back. Couture, rebellion. Crane's wife. Each phrase struck like a blade. I need to think. Nina's expression shattered. You need to act. He flinched, because for the first time, her voice wasn't seductive. It was commanding. He looked at her and didn't see the mistress he'd once admired. He saw someone who doubted him, and that terrified him more than Elaine's runway walk. The cameras kept flashing, but not for him. His narration cracked apart. I controlled this story. I own the narrative. Then why did it feel like he was no longer the author? Nina's voice dropped. They'll follow her now. She just hijacked your show. Alex's mouth opened, but no words came. The applause still echoed faintly backstage. He could hear it. Not for him, for her, for Elaine. Recognition, he realized, wasn't just painful. It was lethal. He felt the blade of it now. Nina leaned close, her voice no longer a whisper. Do something, Alex. And for the first time in years, he didn't know what. Each flash felt like a wound. Elaine kept walking, her face blank, her spine rigid, her hands trembling within the long silk sleeves. Paparazzi bulbs burst white against the darkness as she stepped beyond the runway's end, but she refused to look at them because she wasn't here for them. Her heels struck the polished floor with deliberate precision. Point one step for every time you silenced me. Alex, flash, her mind blurred. She saw herself years earlier, standing outside her own atelier in the rain, clutching the memo that revoked her access. Her name stripped from her designs. Her voice erased. Point one step for every night you said I wasn't enough. Flash, her heart clenched. The whispers. Boardrooms that fell silent when she entered. Nina's delicate hands on Alex's shoulder, framing it all as business. One step. For every time you pretended to own me. Flash. Elaine stumbled. The cameras caught it. A flicker of fragility in a woman who'd taught herself never to show weakness. But then she steadied. Her narration fractured, but clear. This isn't weakness. This is truth. Her breath hitched. She remembered the night she nearly burned the gown. Alone, in that locked atelier, sobbing silently so Sophie wouldn't hear. She remembered holding the matches, but she couldn't do it, because destroying her design would mean he'd won. Now, every stitch of that midnight silk was a scar displayed. Every crystal sewn to the bodice was a moment he told her she wasn't good enough. And tonight, the world watched those scars glimmer. Her silence, once forced, had become armor. Let them see me. Her narration broke. Let him see me. Behind her, the runway stretched empty. Ahead, the backstage curtain beckoned. Elaine slowed. The applause deafened. She hated it, because they weren't clapping for her pain. They didn't know. They saw Couture. They didn't see confession. She stood there for a moment longer, caught between past and future, listening to a sound that wasn't applause at all. It was absolution. Flash, flash. The cameras didn't care about her breakdown. Only the spectacle. She stepped through the backstage curtain, vanishing from their lenses, her hands clenched to fists. She wanted to cry, but there were no tears left. Sophie stood waiting, silent. Elaine couldn't speak. Her narration cracked apart. You took my voice, Alex. And now the world heard it anyway. She felt Sophie's hand touch her shoulder, soft and steady. And for the first time in years, Elaine let herself lean into that touch, not as a designer, not as a wife, but as herself. That eye in the distance, the applause faded, and Elaine whispered words no camera could catch. I'm free. Nina adjusted the diamond clasp on her bag, forcing composure. As reporters surged forward, paparazzi bulbs strobed like lightning. Her red dress, once her power, now felt like a target. Alex was nowhere to be found, so they turned to her. Ms. Delacroix, is it true you orchestrated Mrs. Crane's removal from the board? Who leaked the emails, Nina? Did you pressure Alex Crane to sideline his wife? The question struck like knives. But Nina smiled. She had learned long ago. In public, weakness was suicide. Absolutely not, she said coolly. Mrs. Crane stepped down willingly. It was her choice. More flashes, more voices. Then how do you explain these emails? A journalist stepped forward, holding a printout, bold subject lines visible even from Nina's distance. Control Elaine quietly. She's emotionally unstable. Convince Alex she's a liability. For a moment, Nina's throat tightened. She recognized her own words that a voice behind the cameras shouted. Elaine's people leaked them this morning, hours before the show. Nina's smile strained. That's ridiculous. Was it revenge, Nina? Is this what tonight's show was about? The word revenge stuck in her ears. She fought the panic clawing up her throat. She thought she had buried those messages. Thought Alex would never see them. Now the press, the same people who once worshipped her as Alex's new beginning, smelled blood. She searched the crowd, desperate. Where's Alex? No answer. Reporters pressed closer. Are you still Crane Industries spokesperson? Did you sabotage Mrs. Crane's career to take her place? Were you the real reason she vanished? Nina snapped. I did nothing wrong. Silence. That IT wasn't denial. IT wasn't convincing. Point one. Reporter spoke, softer. Then why are you shaking? Nina looked down. Her hands trembled. I in the distance. Backstage, applause echoed. Elaine's applause. Nina's narration cracked, bitter and hollow. I stole everything she had, and now she's taking it back. She forced herself to stand taller, lifting her chin as she'd been trained to. I have no further comment. She turned sharply, walked, but each step felt heavier, because for the first time in years, Nina Delacroix was no longer chasing cameras. She was running from them. Morning arrived with sirens. Elaine stood motionless at the edge of the street as black-clad officers stormed her hidden atelier. She watched them break open the old wooden door, the same door where she once hung closed, with her own trembling hand. Now, it bore police tape. Madam Crane, step aside. The officer's tone wasn't aggressive, just procedural. Alex's procedure. Elaine said nothing, because this wasn't a surprise. She knew Alex. When power slipped from his fingers, he lashed out. She let them pass. Inside, officers scattered, searching the dust-heavy studio where she'd stitched her rebellion. Rolls of unused silk, sketches of the gown she wore on the runway, empty sewing tables, all were photographed. As evidence. Intellectual property theft, the officer explained flatly. Elaine almost smiled. Alex had accused her of stealing designs, her own. She walked deeper into the atelier as officers rifled through the remnants of her work. Her narration, steady now. He's still trying to control the story. I in the corner. Sophie sat silently, guarded but untouched. Elaine met her gaze. We knew this would come, Sophie whispered. Elaine nodded. Let them look. Because what they saw wasn't hidden. IT was waiting. On the far wall hung an old security monitor, rusted, flickering. The officers ignored it, but the hard drive connected to it recorded everything. Months of footage, not of gowns. Of visitors. Alex's visitors. Business meetings conducted in this forgotten studio. Documents spread over fabric tables. Voices recorded without their knowledge. Elaine had left the cameras running, and Alex had walked right in. His narration, once the architect of her erasure, now recorded his undoing. She'd let him believe the atelier was abandoned. He'd used it to plot, and she'd let him, because revenge was loud. Justice was patient. One officer approached, holding her sketches. Do you admit these are stolen designs? Elaine's voice was calm. I designed them, while employed by Crane Industries. She met his gaze. While owned by my husband. The officer hesitated. Charges will be filed. Elaine nodded. I'm counting on it. He frowned, but by then, Sophie had quietly unlocked the storage drawer behind her, placed a small flash drive on the empty cutting table. Elaine's last design. Not a gown. Evidence. She turned to the lead officer. I suggest you watch the recordings. His confusion deepened. You're surrendering? No. Elaine whispered. I'm showing you where the real theft happened. Sirens faded outside. Her narration, cold as silk. Let him accuse me. Let him drag me into court. Because this time, I'm bringing the cameras. From across the street, press photographers zoomed lenses toward the broken atelier door. Alex's raid was his statement. But Elaine's silence was her trap. She stepped outside, lifted her chin, and for the first time, she didn't flinch when the flashbulbs erupted. The box arrived without a name. A simple black couture garment box, tied with a single silk ribbon, blood red. No security escort. No lawyers. Just silence. Alex stared at IT. IT sat at the center of the marble foyer, looking absurdly delicate against the cold expanse of his mansion. That he knew who sent it. He just didn't understand why. Hands trembling, he untied the ribbon, lifted the lid. Inside, folded parchment paper. A faint trace of lavender clung to it. His heart tightened. Though he wouldn't admit WHY.AT first, he saw nothing. And then, legal documents. Divorce papers filed. Signed. Neat as a contract, neater than the one Elaine had signed years ago. But there was something else. Beneath the papers lay a single item. A silk scarf. Midnight blue. Crystals stitched across its length. Glinting like frozen tears. That he recognized the pattern. IT matched the gown she wore the night she destroyed him. Alex's narration fractured. Not vengeance. Not cruelty. Just closure. That he crushed the papers in his fists. But rage wouldn't come. Because deep down, he understood. This wasn't a message. It was a goodbye. The mansion felt colder than usual. He sank onto the marble floor, hands still gripping the scarf like a man clinging to something he never understood. And outside his glass walls, the world moved on. Miles away, by the sea, Elaine sat alone. No cameras, no reporters, no stage. Just waves and silence. Her small studio overlooked the water. Wooden floors. White walls. Sunlight flooding in through open windows. She stitched quietly. Not for a client. Not for a show. Just for herself. A simple linen dress. No crystals. No silk. No signatures. Freedom wasn't loud. It was simple. Her narration, soft but unbreakable. Power is never stolen. It's reclaimed. She paused, listening to the seed. Sophie's voice drifted in from the next room. Madam, tea? Elaine smiled gently. Call me Elaine. No title. No brand. Just a woman. She tied off the last thread, folded the linen carefully, and stepped outside into the sunlight. Behind her, the studio door remained opened. No locks. No security, no fear. Alex would never find her here, and even if he did, he wouldn't recognize the woman who'd once walked his runway. Elaine Crane no longer existed, and that was her greatest creation. The waves rolled endlessly as she walked toward the shore. A soft wind lifted her hair, and for the first time in years, she wasn't owned. She was free.